It's true. Okay, I interrupt this very important conversation to call to order the regular meeting of, what is the date? Sorry.
October 18th.
Thank you. October 18th, 2023 of the Cathedral City Planning Commission. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Lee,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner Lowe,
Present.
Vice Chair Malakoff,
Present.
Chair Daly.
Present. Thank you. All right, moving on, I'd like to invite everyone on the dais and in the audience to please stand for the flag salute. Okay. May I have a confirmation of the agenda, please?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
We don't have any.
From the previous meeting.
Do we want to take public comments?
Oh, wait, we don't have any.
We don't
I'm so
have
sorry. I just did that out of habit. I apologize, everybody. You're right. There are none. Right. Moving on. Public comments.
I don't know. You could ask.
Why don't we have any
Huh?
minutes?
They weren't completed.
Oh, okay.
So they'll be provided in your next packet for consideration.
Wow. All right. All right. Public comments. The public is invited to address the Planning Commission on any matter not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on agenda item, please wait to be recognized under that item. Except for special circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits the Planning Commission or staff from responding or taking action on any comments made by the public unless it pertains to an item that appears on the agenda. All speakers should give their name and city of residence. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes.
I don't have any request to speak forms for public comments. If there's anyone that would like to provide comments on anything that is not on the agenda, now would be the time.
Okay. All right. At this time, we will close public comments and move on to non-public hearing items. Item A, Zoning Ordinance Amendment 23-001. Still laughing at minutes.
Through you.
Totally agree.
All right. Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Andrew Firestein, your Director of Development Services. As you can see, we're a little short-staffed this evening, so I am not Sandra Molina. She prepared the staff report for you, and I'll be giving the presentation. Tonight, this is just a discussion. We are looking for some direction, some feedback from the Planning Commission, and it's our intent to bring the ordinance back at a November meeting for your recommendation to City Council, and at present we're targeting the November 29th City Council hearing date. In recent years, in order to address housing needs in the state, the California legislature has amended state law to streamline the approval process and expand capacity to accommodate the development of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, in single-family and multifamily zones. Under the conditions specified in state law, a local agency must ministerially approve an application for a building permit to create an ADU. There have been multiple bills adopted in recent sessions that have changed ADU laws and the manner in which local agencies permit ADUs, two of which are the primary focus of the presentation tonight. I will touch on a couple of others that we should have some awareness of, as these will shape and inform our processes in the future. Leading off, an ADU is defined in state law and our ordinance as an attached or detached residential unit that provides complete independent living facilities and is located on a lot with a proposed or existing primary residential unit. ADUs are allowed in any zone that allows a residential use on a lot developed or proposed to be developed with one or more residential units. ADUs can be converted from existing space, such as a master bedroom, attached garage, storage area, or an accessory structure. A junior ADU, or JADU, is specifically a unit contained entirely within the structure of an existing or proposed residential unit that does not exceed 500 square feet. As I mentioned, the city must permit an ADU that conforms to state law. There are still, however, some opportunities to shape and influence how ADUs are developed in Cathedral City, provided that the city is following state law. The city's current ordinance was adopted in September 2022. Recent legislation, notably SB 897 and AB 2211, have modified state law and require amendments for our local ordinance to remain consistent with state law. SB 897 requires that the standards imposed on accessory dwelling units be objective. Objective standards are those that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official and are uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criterion available and knowledgeable by both the development applicant and the public official prior to submittal. Those may include standards related to parking, height, setback, landscape, architectural review, maximum size of a unit, and standards that prevent adverse impacts on any real property that is listed in the California Register of Historical Resources. State law requires height limitations that allow for at least a height of 16 feet for an attached ADU on a lot with an existing or proposed single-family or multifamily dwelling unit, a height of 18 feet for a detached ADU on a lot with an existing or proposed single-family or multifamily dwelling unit that's in close proximity to transit, with an allowance for an additional 2 feet in height to accommodate a roof pitch on the ADU that is aligned with the roof pitch of the primary dwelling unit, and a height of 25 feet, or the height limitation in our local zoning ordinance that applies to the primary dwelling unit for an ADU that is attached to the primary dwelling. Previously, local agencies could restrict ADUs to the side or rear yard of a property. AB 2221 now directs that local agencies must allow an ADU in the front yard if it cannot be constructed elsewhere on the property with a 4-foot side and rear setback. SB 897 prohibits an ADU from triggering a fire sprinkler requirement unless fire sprinklers are otherwise required in the primary dwelling unit. And SB 897 also directs how comments are communicated to an applicant and specific timeframes for those comments. From AB 345, there is additional language that is strictly applicable to ADUs, that ADUs may be sold separately if the conditions shown on the slide are met. There is additional legislation that I'll cover in a moment that gives local agencies the option to expand the conveyance of an ADU further if a local agency so desires. Stepping through the proposed revisions that are in your packet, there are several new definitions. The ordinance now reflects that a demolition permit for a detached garage that is to be replaced with an ADU must be reviewed with the application for the ADU and issued at the same time. The development standards specifically address the new state law pertaining to fire sprinklers. There is now a 5-foot separation requirement between structures where the current ordinance requires 10 feet. That requirement also exceeds the requirements of the California Building Code. The ordinance has been revised to allow an 800 square foot ADU in the front yard where it cannot be built elsewhere on the property at a 4-foot setback. Existing language prohibiting the entrance of an ADU facing a public right-of-way has been deleted, and language counting a covered balcony, porch, or patio towards the total floor area has also been deleted. Last, the revisions update the parking requirements to reflect when an ADU is proposed as part of a new single-family or multifamily dwelling on the same lot. Next 2 slides, I'll share with you what the review of a new ADU would look like. On this slide, this illustrates a detached 2-bedroom ADU that's on the left part of the slide at a 4-foot rear and side yard setback with the parking met through 2 spaces in the driveway. The existing code would not allow a covered patio or porch, although the revisions that are in your packet would allow that. The ordinance currently limits detached ADUs to a maximum building height of 16 feet. The proposed revisions consistent with state law would allow this detached ADU to go up to 18 feet in height. The current ordinance also requires the ADU to match the design of the primary unit, including materials, color, and roofing. There are a couple of bills from this legislative session that further influence ADUs. These have recently been signed into law by the governor. AB 1033 is optional and would allow for ADUs to be sold separately through a condominium map. So that is another change that we can consider. I would suggest if we are looking at that we do that separately from the ordinance that is before you this evening. And then AB 1332 requires local agencies to prepare a program for the pre-approval of ADUs. The date of this is January 1st, 2025, so no action is required as part of this ordinance change, but that is additional work that staff will need to undertake before January 1st, 2025. And then last, AB 976 was also signed, and this will require the owner occupancy requirement for any ADU to be removed. This will be updated in your ordinance before it comes back for consideration. So with that, I'll end my presentation and turn this back over to the commission.
Thank you so much. I do have a couple questions for you. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to work backwards. That last piece of legislation that was just signed, AB something or rather, you refresh my memory?
976?
976? Is that what it was?
The last one on the list.
Did you say that AB 976 is going to ultimately get included in a later draft of these changes, or are we going to wait till next year to do that?
So it would be my suggestion that when we bring this ordinance back for the commission's action in a meeting in November before it goes to city council, that we implement this change. So this would require the owner occupancy requirement to be deleted from our ordinance. So I would suggest that we incorporate that into the revisions before you take formal action.
Is that just because that's kind of an easy thing to get done? I'm not sure why we would do that but not do SB 1033 and 1332 all at the same time?
So a lot of that has to do with the timing, and I think the timing of AB 976 is more imminent
than
it is with the other bills that I referenced. AB 1332 that requires action by January 1st, 2025, and simply that's the development of a program for the pre-approval of ADUs, where someone could come in, get an ADU pre-approved, it goes up on the city's website, anyone can access that. So that's a program that will develop over the next year or so. It doesn't require an ordinance change.
Okay, fair enough. Which leads me to my next question, and apparently it's not going to be before us this year, but just so I have an idea what's coming down the pipeline, what does that even mean?
So the idea there would be that we're removing a barrier to the development of an ADU. Right now, if I were to develop an ADU, I'd have to go get a designer, I'd have to prepare a set of plans and go through a review process for that. But with a pre-approved set of plans for an ADU, if I were to follow this process, those plans, once they're approved by the city, would be made available to anyone else looking to build an ADU in the city, so that I could go download a set of pre-approved plans from the city, know that they meet the city's standards, and really skip that step of having to retain that design professional, having to build my own set of plans. It's a template, if you will.
It's actually pretty clever. Okay. So back to the changes at hand. I really only have one question. This is on, these pages aren't numbered. This is under Section 9.114030, administration.
Page number at the bottom.
Is there? Oh, page 9. Thank you. Much better eyesight than me.
Of the draft.
Yes.
It's the agenda packet number.
There's the new addition, subdivision C, about a demolition permit. What was the rule about demolition permits prior to this adoption?
I would say that you're going through an ADU permit process and that there would be a separate permit for the demolition of that garage. I think this is the state's way of saying that there's potentially some wasted time, if you will, in having those as separate sequential processes. By making them concurrent processes, there is a time savings.
Got it. Okay, that's all I have. Who would like to go next? All right, Commissioner.
So I have a couple questions. One, I'm just not clear on, I'll just give you a hypothetical. Somebody has an existing attached garage, two-car garage. They want to convert that to a JADU. Do we have the ability to layer any additional parking requirements in order to get that application approved?
Apologize, I'm looking at the code.
So it's actually under state law. So state law clarifies that when an ADU is created through the conversion of a garage, replacement of off-street parking spaces cannot be required by the local agency.
Okay, so even though our ordinance for ADUs is that we would require an additional off-street parking for the ADU, we could abandon or we could give up 2 off-street parking places to allow a JADU and not require any additional parking. Okay. My second question has to do with the minimum setback. So again, a hypothetical homeowner comes in, wants to build a 800 square foot ADU in their backyard. They have an existing pool. The only way they can fit the 800 square feet onto the lot would be to encroach on that 4-foot setback. Can we deny the application? So in essence, the fact that the pool's there, they would have to make a decision to either abandon the pool and build the ADU with the 4-foot setback or just not build it.
Yes, so we do have to just try to accommodate them the best that we can. So say if in your example, they have to suddenly, or they somehow have room where they're encroaching on like a front yard where they can meet those other standards as well, then we accommodate that way. But if there's no room to meet those objective standards, those objective setbacks, then, we don't have to approve that.
Okay, so the fact that they have a pool is not material to whether or not they could fit that ADU.
No, and then the other aspect of that is say that they decide, well, okay, if that's the case, it's because I have a pool that I cannot have an ADU. If they choose to do construction to remove something or to shorten up the pool, make it in a way that they can have an ADU with that, that's fine. But the pool itself is not the consideration. It's whether we can accommodate the square footage necessary.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lee?
First of all, I have a couple of just questions on definitions. Referring to packet page 8 is where the definitions are. The first is under accessory structure. When it says attached accessory dwelling unit, what do we actually mean by attached? Does it have to have a shared wall, or could it be accessed through a corridor? Or, what's the meaning of attachment in that definition?
So my experience with this in another city, it has to be physically attached. A breezeway, a corridor, it would not work. This needs to be a physical.
So it has to be a common wall?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Similarly, further down, detached accessory dwelling unit means a unit that is or will be detached from a proposed or existing primary dwelling, but is not a conversion of an existing detached accessory structure. So if, for example, somebody has a detached garage on their property, they can't convert that into an ADU?
So they can convert it into an ADU. Usually the conversions, depending on, say that it might be slightly over 1,200 square feet for whatever reason, the garage is slightly over 1,200 square feet, they can still convert that into an ADU. It's because it's being used at the exact same building. So the purpose, and we can, obviously, that's why we're here to discuss if maybe that's not clear in our definition.
I'm sorry, I'm trouble hearing you. Are the mics on?
Yes.
Oh.
Does that work a little better? Yes. No? Should I try maybe? Okay, perfect. So the conversion aspect is basically you're allowing that existing square footage that might be a little larger than an ADU, that if somebody came in and wanted to just build one from the ground up, would not qualify for, say, slightly over 1,200 square feet, or just wouldn't accommodate state law in the same way. So conversions are treated slightly different than if somebody came in and wanted to have a detached ADU in their backyard from scratch. Does that make sense? So the idea of the definition is to separate conversions of an existing structure and building of a detached full ADU.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure that the definition really
We can look into
says what
that.
you mean it to say, so maybe just revisit that. So in terms of the setbacks, again, so we have 5 foot and 4 foot. I'm not quite sure which ones are required where by law, so what are those limits?
So there's a 4-foot setback for the side and rear property lines that comes from state law. We must do that.
Okay.
Separately, we have in our current ordinance a 10-foot separation between buildings. That is in our local ordinance. We are proposing to revise that to 5 feet. Now, if you look at the California Building Code, the minimum building code requirement is 0 feet when you have a 1-hour firewall. So that exceeds or is greater than the minimum California Building Code requirement. So 5 feet is what we're putting in our local ordinance for the distance between a primary dwelling unit and a detached accessory structure, for instance.
Okay, so these setbacks relate to the distance between the ADU and the primary dwelling unit?
The 5 foot, yes. The 4 feet is the side and the rear property line.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, on the, well, I think you've answered that, actually. I was going to ask about including the provisions for 967, but you said we could do that for this draft, and the other two would be subsequent. Okay, let me
Correct.
just check. On page 13, find it here, and actually paragraph 13, I think it's just, again, tidying up language, and this isn't part of your proposed amendments, but that first sentence wasn't clear to me. It says, A, 1 new parking space per accessory dwelling unit or per bedroom, whichever is less. I can't imagine how that could be anything except 1.
Sorry, where are you reading?
Yeah? So I think the language just needs tidying up a little bit there.
Thank you.
I would agree. We'll take a look at that. That's existing language in the code.
Yeah, I know,
We can
but
refine that.
I I read some of the other existing language, sorry.
It's okay. While we're on page 13, this
Yeah.
actually is a good point. You had asked a question about the definition of an attached accessory dwelling unit. If you look at 12C, so just at the very top of page 13, you'll actually see where this language comes into effect in the local ordinance. So the conversion of an existing legally permitted accessory structure is not subject to the maximum unit size requirements. So that's an area where trying to separate the definition of a detached ADU from the conversion
Right.
comes into play.
I see how that makes sense now. Yeah.
For a detached structure, but not for the conversion.
Okay. And then on 15, there was a, where is that? Again, this is existing language, I apologize, but it's on page 14. And I just wondered what the rationale was. It says that utilities for detached accessory dwelling units, excluding those that are within the space of an existing accessory structure, the city may require a new or separate utility connection. I just didn't know what the circumstances were for that. What situation are we trying to cover with that language?
You want to answer that?
Rephrase the question, because there's the option of always having a separate utility to the ADU.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why the city may require it and may not. What's the rationale? Sorry?
You mean the city itself?
Yeah, it says the city may require it or it may not. So
I don't know, when would it be applicable? Give me a good shot on that one.
We can research that further and bring an answer back.
okay.
I can provide-
One of the requirements now with the ADU laws apparently is that everything has to be objective. So there has to be a reason why you're making that determination.
So in my experience with other agencies, normally when they say, first of all, that language is taken directly from the state law, so there's no mandate to have an ADU with a separate utility. But normally, sometimes people want to, say, rent out the ADU, so they on purpose want to work with whatever utility companies to make sure that it is separate. So just for logistical purposes, they, ask for that service. Another thing, too, is if the city or whatever utility companies might need to do that, for whatever reason, say that property or the area, it really would be better, easier to make it a separate utility. That really just gives you options in terms of whether or not to have separate utilities. Some don't require it, others, prefer to have separate. So I'm not really sure in terms of if anybody has specifically come to the counter and say, I want a separate utility.
You have the ability to sell the unit too.
Oh, well.
Right. I mean, some of the new legislation will allow ADUs to be separately sold.
Correct.
And
Yeah, so we can definitely,
right. So if you turn it into a condo, you're definitely going to want separate utility supplies for each unit. But my question was only about the city requiring it. I mean, if the developer wants to install separate utilities, I don't see a problem with that. I was just wondering why that was in there, and it sounds like that was copied from state law.
but we can, even make it clear that, an applicant or they may require it, or they may ask or request that utilities be separate.
Yeah, I was just going to say, may just means that the city has the option to do it at some point. It doesn't mean that it will, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the city needs to justify why it even has the word may. I mean, it's just may. The city may.
We had language similar to this in the last city I worked in that was a full-service city with a municipal utility. And it's language that a municipal utility would like to see. So we can take a look at that and see if that needs to be modified or changed in any way. But I think the discussion around the conveyance of an ADU, that would support, considering having some language on utilities in the ordinance.
And then my final point is just sort of reality check. So this currently and will remain a ministerial process, so none of this is going to come to us for approval of ADUs. Is that correct?
Until we amend the ordinance again, yes.
Yeah, well, yes. Except, of course, we see that in, say, a PDU track map, something like that.
So there are the options to add ADUs to new single families. So as with a recent project that was before the Planning Commission, you could see it in that instance.
Okay, all right, thank you. I have nothing else.
Commissioner Thompson? I'll get to you.
Thank you. Might want to ask his first. Could you clarify, I understand that there's 3 new bills that have gone to the governor's desk, and he has until tomorrow to sign them. What is the status of 976, 1033, and 1332?
They were signed into law.
All 3?
Yes.
So, joint conversation probably. How does this affect short-term rentals if owner occupancy is being removed or deleted, so forth? And how does it affect height requirements? For example, in the Cove, I believe there's a 16-foot height requirement or limit. This says 18 feet. So how do we deal with those?
So I believe, and our counsel can correct me if I'm wrong, there is a prohibition on rentals less than 30 days. So I think that is taken care of. There's not a concern with short-term vacation rentals and ADUs. That's in state law. In terms of the height, it's nuanced, and if you give me a moment, I will get the language from state law to make sure that I'm parsing through that correctly. It's nuanced.
I think the information about 976 on page 7 answers the question on short-term rentals. Paragraph 3, yeah.
So if you look at page 11 in your packet, you'll see the language that's in the draft ordinance. And then page 21 has the minimum requirements in state law. So the height requirements for a detached accessory dwelling unit in our local ordinance are 16 feet in height if the primary dwelling is less than 16 feet high. And that is consistent with the minimum requirement in state law.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Commissioner Malakoff, do you have any questions?
I have one.
Okay.
Thank you for your response to my written questions. I appreciate it. They were very complete. And the staff report, I'm sure, was difficult given all the state requirements and incorporating them into our code. I think the one thing I'm confused on is the parking requirement. So parking can be either enclosed, covered, or open. So am I correctly understanding that for ADUs and junior ADUs that you only have to provide 2 open parking spaces? You don't have to do covered or garage?
Yes.
I'm talking about when you're building a new structure. I'm not, I guess a junior ADU is not part of the question. I'm talking about like when you actually build a new ADU.
So you're talking about just a whole new construction of an ADU or a whole new construction of a primary residence and an ADU?
I didn't think of it that way, but I guess both. I mean, when you're converting the garage, the question's been answered in the code. But when you're building a new ADU, let's say 800 feet in the back corner of your property, do you have to have covered parking, or is it just 2 spaces on the driveway?
So HCD has clarified that, so we can't exceed 1 space per unit or bedroom as a requirement for parking. So
But it's a space then, not
it's
a
not, it
carport or
doesn't, right,
garage.
it doesn't describe.
Okay.
mhm.
And then what happens, so then if you're building in some of the projects we just looked at, you're building a new house and an ADU in the back, would you then have to have 2 enclosed spaces for the single-family residence and then 1 open space for the ADU?
So if that were to come in with a new dwelling unit, there's no additional parking requirement for the ADU.
I couldn't hear you.
Will you say that in the mic a little louder, please?
If an ADU were proposed as part of a new dwelling unit, such as the recent case that came before you, there is no additional parking requirement for the ADU.
Okay.
Really? Yeah. Oh, all right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Gentlemen? No? Okay. Thank you. There's no action required from us on this particular item, right?
No, but if we could just double check that nobody would like to speak on this item
Okay.
in the audience.
Wait, I'm sorry. On this item?
Yeah, so I know that, so it's a little different. So normally public hearing is a more formal requirement, but Brown Act allows anybody to speak on any item on the agenda. So if somebody had an opinion about ADUs or our ordinance, and if they would like to
Okay,
share
well,
that.
then if we have anybody in the audience who would like to address the commission on item 2A, the floor is yours.
I did not receive any request to speak forms, and it looks like no one
Okay.
is raising their hands.
Seeing none, I will close public comments on item 2A. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, moving on to item 3. Thank you, everybody, for the work, and thank you guys very much to staff for all of that. That was really informative. Any other comments? No? Okay. Quiet bunch today. Item 4, City Attorney Report.
No, nothing additional to report.
Okay. Item 5, City Planning Report. Anything from Planning Department?
No, no comments tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Well, in that case, what time is it? We will adjourn this meeting at 6:38 p.m. Thank you.